Reading out this essay today from Jack Sullivan from a collection titled Hitchcock's Music. This is Marlene Dietrich's Cabaret Cinema Stage Fright. In Alfred Hitchcock's book, she is still top temptress for the screen. That's how Carlyle Jones described Marlene Dietrich, who in Stage Fright sings Cole Porter and turns in a stunningly sultry performance as Charlotte Inwood, a steely, desperate cabaret singer. She was too tempting, apparently, for Joseph Breen, a censor who found The Laziest Girl in Town, her keynote song, quite offensive, made a long list of demands: wear a proper slip when she removes a blood-stained dress, remain out of scene when she changes her costume, avoid lustful, prolonged or open-mouthed kissing, and put a robe on her before she and Jonathan embrace. Breen's two-page list of demands in separate memos concludes with delete the underlined word in the following speech by Dietrich: go blow yourself. No one blows himself in Stage Fright, but Charlotte does blow her big song. Like Young and Innocent and Rope, this is a narrative in which a disastrous performance causes justice to prevail. Music is the doorway to truth. The camera tracks a Boy Scout bringing a bloodstained doll to Charlotte's attention during her performance of Edith Piaf's La Vie en Rose, rattling her so much she can't finish the song. This is one of Hitchcock's most theatrical musical sequences, a further development of the movie-opera hybrid that began with Blackmail, Waltzes from Vienna, and The Man Who Knew Too Much. Stage Fright marked Hitchcock's return to England and the world of British musical theatre, the enchanted obsession of his youth, which he had exploited so winningly in The 39 Steps and Murder. For narrative twists, the usual Hitchcock formula: the wrong man, Jonathan, turns out to be the right one, but Eva turns out to be a villain, not an instrument of justice. The heroine, Eve, played by Jane Wyman, betrays her love a fugitive rather than saving him. As if under Capricorn, Hitchcock was determined to break out of suspense cliches and go after something different. In Dietrich's unhappy cabaret scene, he experiments with musical space. Charlotte's number is first heard from a distance outside the tent as the boy approaches the entrance. Inside, Eve's father cues her that the child is drawing near. The camera follows him in a series of point-of-view shots. Eve's, her father's, finally Smith's, then closes on Charlotte singing the boy's startled face, and finally a bloodstained doll, that is, as in Murder, part of a theatrical strategy to get a killer to confess. Her sultry voice falters and the prompter tries to intervene, but the song collapses, followed by the orchestra. The scene is significant, less in its thriller suspense effects than in illustrating how a song can flower, crumble, and in its demise reveal something significant. Stage Fright is usually regarded as a run-for-cover project after the disaster of Under Capricorn, a lightweight trifle marking time. To Hitchcock, however, it was a daunting, complex experiment in the merging of cinema with musical theatre. In a nervous letter to Jack Warner, he spoke of the challenges, which included background of the stage with musical comedy going on, a garden party with all kinds of singing and other sounds. Unless this is handled directly by myself or someone who knows exactly what is wanted, the completion of this picture would drag on for months. Drag on it did, with Hitchcock worrying about Jane Wyman's maid disguise, too pretty he thought, and Alastair Sim's eccentric performance as her father, but he apparently got what he wanted from Marlene Dietrich. Then the musical experiments came off impressively, for Dietrich complained that he never indicated dissatisfaction or disapproval of what she was doing. She certainly succeeded in inspiring the camera. Hitchcock blends cinema with musical theatre in Dietrich's musical numbers, panning off stage and on stage to fuse the songs with the murder mystery. She is filmed in a dazzling long shot during When You Whisper Sweet Nothings, declaring that the only murderer is the orchestra leader. In delicious close-up, during Laziest Girl in Town, she perches and writhes cat-like on a divan against a decadent backdrop of floating clouds, the camera swirling up and jerking back. The chorus is part of the action, shown in the left side offstage shot, as the camera swivels on stage towards Charlotte. It also floats into the dressing room where Charlotte and Jonathan trade threats. The prelude to La Vie en Rose is background to the police search for the suspected killer, and for Eve in her fainting scene. As Bob Fosse did 22 years later in Cabaret, Hitchcock turns cabaret numbers into a fluid score that parallels and comments on the story. Dietrich was ideal for the role of Charlotte. Alma Reville, in her meticulous screen treatment, describes the character as the embodiment of the Dietrich persona, a strikingly attractive woman with many sides to her nature. She is a very successful musical comedy star who, on the stage, can make her audience roll in the aisles with a comic song. Off stage, her sultry sort of beauty and slightly flashy manner keep us guessing about her true personality. Is she scullery maid or princess, kitten or tiger behind those startlingly fashionable clothes? Whatever she is revealed to be, she is consistently fascinating, dynamic, and like a magnet where men are concerned. Incidentally, the magnet is in constant use. The magnet did not, alas, attract audiences or critics. Unlike Under Capricorn, Stage Fright was a commercial and critical flop on both sides of the Atlantic, even with the star power of Dietrich and Jane Wyman, who plays the fickle heroine. Unless one assumes the film was ahead of its time, the reasons for this disappointment are hard to fathom. This is one of Hitchcock's most inventive looks at backstage theatre life, with a murder mystery coming to plot, and a stunning final epiphany, but once again Hitchcock was hurt by not coming through with a suspense picture. As revealed in numerous interviews, he was all too aware that whenever he stepped out of his role as master of suspense, he frustrated those who expected his usual formula. That he chose to step out so frequently indicates he had larger ambitions than his critics or audiences were willing to grant. Stage Fright is about listening and reinterpreting what we hear. A memorable piano performance tells Eve she's in love with the wrong man. Charlotte's botched song tells the detective something is amiss in his case. The resonant sound system in the theatre during the finale tells what has really been happening throughout the twisted narrative, something neither we nor Eve wants to hear. The ensuing silence tells Jonathan, the wrong man turned sympathetic villain, that he can trust Eve when she tells him they are alone and promises to help him escape. Eve is lying, the film's final whopper, and the loudspeakers don't tell the truth either. This is a treacherous world in which we can't always trust what we hear. The most reliable sounds are of music, Charlotte's disastrous performance and Smith's sublime one. Musically, Stage Fright is a remarkable film, mingling a haunting score by the British composer Leighton Lucas, who had orchestrated Under Capricorn a year earlier, with sensational songs by Cole Porter, Edith Piaf, and the great émigré cabaret composer Misha Spolyansky. Watching Dietrich sing these through Hitchcock's dramatic camera angles is alone worth the price of admission, as you would expect in a story about musical theatre. Stage Fright has other clever source music as well, including Alastair Sims' accordion rendition of Mendelssohn, and the boisterous band music during the garden party. Lucas came through with one of the most lyrical melodies in a Hitchcock movie. It begins as source music, a piano tune played by Ordinary Smith for Eve. Its six-note phrase, looping back on itself in melancholy harmony, suggests unattainable longing, but Eve, like many of John Hitchcock's American heroines, has a dogged determination that simply precludes giving up. She dumps the wrong man, Jonathan, for Smith, the detective pursuing him, even before discovering that the former is guilty after all. In the coda, after watching in horror as the curtain literally comes down on Jonathan, she promenades down a theatre corridor with her new lover in a graceful long shot made more so by a final eruption of Smith's melody, scored for final orchestra, its harmonies now upbeat rather than bittersweet. Just as a catastrophic performance wrecks one character, a strong one empowers another. The seductiveness of Smith's signature theme inspires Eve to fall in love with him and ditch Jonathan. At the piano, Ordinary Smith is anything but. To Eve, the important thing about Smith is not his police credentials, but his presence at the keyboard, as she makes clear when she introduces him to her mother. Mr. Smith is a pianist, she says. Her mother immediately compares Smith to Sherlock Holmes in his fiddle. The next time Eve embraces Jonathan, she looks away from his eyes to gaze at the piano. The camera suddenly deserts Jonathan, panning to a close-up of the keyboard, and the luscious piano melody wafts into the scene, a musical memory in Eve's head. The aphrodisiac for one lover is a turn-off with the other. This is Hitchcockian counterpoint at its slyest. The heroine kisses one man while thinking of another, whose music evokes her fantasy. Like Shakespeare in Twelfth Night, Hitchcock uses music as the food of love. In the cab scene, the theme returns as a lush 1940s-style piano concerto, as Eve slowly turns her erotic allegiance over to Smith, concluding on a perfect cadence as they finally kiss. But rather than give in to gushiness, Hitchcock again provides shrewd counterpoint. Eve's agenda is making Smith suspicious of Charlotte. The warmer the music gets, the more she accuses Charlotte of being cold, ruthless, capable of homicide. Eve's love for Smith erupts at the precise moment she expresses her hatred for Charlotte, yet the music suggests that her attraction to him is real, not just a manipulation like the wine cellar kiss in Notorious. A consummate actress, she nonetheless wasn't acting in the taxi. I felt I was on a great golden cloud. By the end of this romantic but strangely caustic scene, that cloud has begun to envelop the movie. Smith's piano melody becomes part of Lucas's symphonic rhetoric, moving from the piano in Eve's memory to woodwinds in the invisible score, climaxing in a passionate outburst during Eve's revelation to Smith about her role in helping Jonathan elude the police. Entitled Piano Solo in the Cue Sheet, the tune is initially associated only with Smith, but eventually becomes a larger signifier of love's fickleness. The operatic quality of Hitchcock's musical treatment is similar to the innovations in the Paradigm Case. Again, the most luscious melody is played on the piano by the character whose personality it comes to represent, becoming a leitmotif only after that person actually performs it. Hitchcock used this device again a year later in Strangers on a Train, when the Bruno Sings the Band played on during the carousel scene, making it his grim motto. In Hitchcock's world, music is a fundamental part of the human makeup. Lucas's score has other deft touches as well. The tense chords in the main title move immediately into bloodstained dress, a cue that mysteriously counterpoints a violent crime and restoring melody. The contradiction makes sense only after we realise that Jonathan's story is a lie to get Eve on his side. Hitchcock's resort to a bogus flashback has been frequently criticised, but the device is consistent with a movie about performances and performers. Everyone in Stage Fright is acting, covering up, recreating reality on stage and off. You must call the theatre, Charlotte tells Jonathan during her crisis. I can't play tonight. In fact, she is always playing, as are the other actors. Indeed, this statement itself turns out to be a hoax. The fake flashback is controversial precisely because it is so effective. Since the lie is dramatised, we feel we are being lied to. The music is as meticulously organised as the camera, conferring a strong authenticity. Bloodstained dress segues to an untuned piano during Jonathan's discovery of the body, returns of a harp glissando following the maid's scream, loops back in his fearful fantasy of the maid talking with the police, and is finally jolted into oblivion by a loudly ringing phone. Who would think this superb sequence is a fraud? Much of Lucas's score is pleasantly melodic, largely avoiding suspense movie dissonance. Eve's journey to London and introduction to Smith are cued by pastoral winds, which take on a comic inflection, thin out into obsessive pizzicato, and melt into a wistful melody when she dresses up as Doris the maid. The establishing shot of London is bathed in a rapturous, broad theme. Along with Under Capricorn, this is Hitchcock's most distinctively British score since the Gaumont-Lewis Levy era, Levy assisted with the musical arrangements for Stage Fright. Like everyone, Hitchcock undervalued Stage Fright. During shooting, he couldn't wait for the project to conclude. The musical difficulties were a big headache, he wrote Jack Warner, made more so by the coarse and musical sensibilities of his former British colleagues. This letter is drenched in disillusionment. In Hitchcock's now pro-Hollywood view, the stereotypes were reversed. The Americans were musically refined, the Brits crude beyond compare. Although they have nice, new, shining instruments to work with this, there is a slight question of taste involved, of which there is exactly none here whatsoever. Believe me, they have some pretty crude people. I don't want to bother you with the sordid details. They are my affair, really, and all I have to do is deliver you a picture. The sordid details must have been grim indeed. Into a frenzy 13 years later, there would be no more nostalgic returns to England. Well, Jack, that's about all. As soon as I'm finished shooting and I have the picture rough cut, I'm going to pack all the dubbing tracks into tins and get the hell out of here. That he did, bringing back with him what he regarded as the biggest asset from the project, a savvy young production assistant named Peggy Singer, later Peggy Robertson. Robertson had worked on Under Capricorn. Impressed with her professionalism, Hitchcock indicated his desire to have her be part of his regular production staff. Her work with other producers separated her from Hitchcock for 7 years. But beginning with Vertigo, she permanently joined the Hitchcock film family. As we shall see, Robertson turned out to be a significant force behind the musical maneuverings for the rest of his career.